Hello and welcome to the 41st episode of Tailoring in Conversation. My name is Reza, and in this series I'll be talking to tailors, business owners, cloth merchants and other industry participants from all around the globe to gain a better insight into their worlds. My guest for today is James MacAuslan. James is a bespoke shirt cutter at Butt Shirt Makers based in London's Piccadilly Arcade. In our conversation for today, I'm going to be exploring topics such as crafts within the context of business, see how shirt makers work, and have a better understanding of the differences between shirt and coat making in general. Let's go. James, thank you for being here and making the time. I've been looking forward to speak to you about, some topics around shirt making. I know very little about the shirt making scene, let's say, so I hope to have some education on that today with you. Thank you very much. How are you doing, man?
Thank you for having me. Yeah, I'm doing good. Yeah,
So
hopefully I
you're in
can
the
teach
shop
you
now.
a thing or two. I am, yeah. I'm upstairs in the cutting room, as you can see from the bolts of cloth.
Yeah,
My sort of little hovel up here.
yeah. So are
Yeah, it's been funny.
those fabrics behind you, do you always use them, or are they kind
Yeah,
of like the...
these are our stock lengths, so the stuff we sell
Mhm,
majority of. So you've got like the just the whites, the blues, the
mhm.
pinks, and the creams. That's kind of what men go for all the time.
Yeah.
And then there's two different qualities. So we've got the superior quality, which is your
Mhm,
sort of basic pop thin, and then we've got what's called soyala down here, which is a sort of 170s thread count. So it's a
mhm.
much more luxury cloth, this one, than this
Yeah,
one. But we sell just as much of both of them. It just depends if people want like a shirt that they can wear every day and will
mhm.
be robust, or one that they want to feel really
I
good in.
see. Yeah. Do you ever get bored of those fabrics if you're using them very often?
Not these ones, no. Um, I get bored of the really difficult cloth. You know, when it's
Mm.
like a one-way check that goes both ways,
Oh
one way.
yes, yeah, yeah. Terrible.
And often when people order lots and lots of them, and then by the time you finish cutting them, because you have to do each one individually and spend hours making sure you've got everything going the right way and matching everything. And then
Yeah.
by the end of it, you need to sleep.
I can imagine. I can imagine. So, what I'd like to do is I'd like to ask you about your background because this is like the first time we are kind of like talking. But before that, because I'm gonna forget this question, there are two questions. Why do shirt makers cut the fabric with a knife? I don't know why they do that. Could you explain that?
It's the precision. You know,
Mm-hmm.
when you're dealing with quite small items, the shears will never be able to get the accuracy going round all the little tiny bits. Like the neck slope on a
Mm-hmm.
yoke
Mm-hmm.
is quite exact with the curve, and
Mm-hmm.
certainly also it's because we can do more than one shirt in a go. With a traditional knife, you can cut up to 5 shirts in one go.
Right.
And as like again, trying to do that with a pair of shears and trying to get around a
Mm-hmm.
really small curve and be as precise as you need to be with big shears, you're never gonna achieve it.
Mm-hmm. So,
Um,
if is that because the shear will lift up the fabric and it will displace the stripes?
yeah,
Then my question would be, you do have seam allowances around the neck and the shoulders and the sleeve. So if you have a seam allowance and it slightly shifts on the edge of the fabric, for example, can you not still match the sewing line check or the sewing line stripe? Because you always have a little bit of play with the seam allowance.
yeah. But if it's like if say they're both stripes and it's
Mm-hmm.
moved like that,
Yeah.
say
Oh, I
it's
see.
you're gonna because our seam allowance is only a quarter inch as well. It's not your
Oh,
sort of
right.
I don't know. I think in tailoring you take 3/8, do you, or
Yes,
even
yes,
more?
yes, that's correct. I see. So,
So ours
okay.
is a lot smaller of a seam allowance.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to be a lot more precise.
Yeah, that does
Um,
explain it. Yeah. So then the other question
uh,
is, I've also seen shirt makers cut like 6 or 7 shirts at the same time, and some of those shirts are checks and stripes, but they are all kind of like laying on top of each other. So normally when we are striking out as tailors, we cut the top layer, then we match, pin, then cut. So how are you with all those small seam allowances are piling up all those checks and stripes and cutting them all at once?
So um, obviously, as I was saying, if it's like a really heavy, big, busy one-way check stuff, then you have to do that one by one.
Mm-hmm.
But if it's quite a simple stripe, then and like quite a simple check, you can lay them on top of each other, and you can kind of use the lines as a basis. And because the segments that you're dealing with are quite small, once you kind of cut it down, you cut the bodies, and there's obviously the center line is the line that you want to achieve, and then what happens off there doesn't really matter if they match.
Right.
They're not
Yes.
gonna lay on top of each other. So you want that going that way, and that way to be sitting on top of each other, so that the repeat comes away from itself that way. So you want to make sure that when you're cutting the front bodies, that all the lines are matching up there. But then that's just a case of, as you're laying up each section of cloth, you're making sure that they're on that point is in the right place on each one. Right. And when you come to doing the yokes or the cuffs or things, it's a similar thing. As you're laying them up, because your segment of cloth is probably only about that big.
Yeah.
You can kind of lay them up, and as long as it's not too complicated a check, and you're laying that on top of a very different stripe, you can kind of find lines that match and lay them on top of each other.
Okay, that makes sense.
Obviously, in factories and things, they just pile things on top of each other and slice them all out, and nothing matches anywhere. But when you're doing more delicate work, it's layering it up, and it's trying to make sure everything matches, and that's what takes a bit of time. And it's sort of cutting 5 shirts once rather than cutting 5 shirts individually is slightly quicker, but you still have to take the time of matching it. So.
Yeah. Okay, so that's good for me to know. James, how did you get into shirt making? When did you start? What got you interested? And how did you end up at Butt Shirt Makers?
I think shirts chose me.
Oh, right. Okay, interesting.
I started studying fashion, hated the fashion side, but really enjoyed the making side. Worked with some designers, sort of interned with some designers at Fashion Week, and loved the kind of crazy running around making these insane clothes 24 hours a day for a week before Fashion Week. Right.
What year was this?
I think when I started interning for a fashion designer, that was 2006, maybe.
Okay.
2005, 2006. And then I left school and did it a couple more times in 2007. And then started studying in 2008. So I did a fashion foundation course and didn't like that. It was very egotistical and not very kind of educational. And then but then I really realized what I like is the making side. There was a great tutor who taught the actual sewing stuff, the technical stuff, and he was amazing. So I spent most of the degree hanging out with him, sewing stuff. And then I went on to do the Newham course, the vocational course that a lot of tailors have done to get onto Savile Row.
What, the Bespoke tailoring pre-apprenticeship?
Yeah, that one.
Okay.
And
did you have Valentine as your teacher?
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, he was lovely, wasn't he? And whilst I was doing that, I was working for tailors in the city, and they happened to own a shirt making factory in Kent. And so, like, a lot of what I was doing with them was focusing around the shirts, as well as learning the tailoring stuff from the tailor they had. And so that was kind of shirts, but they're always there. And I think some of the first garments I ever made were actually shirts. You know, when you get the Vogue patterns.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, definitely. That's how I got started as well. Yeah.
I think shirts, I think I only did one suit, but most of what I made were shirts, and messing around with those patterns on that. And then I did the Newham, and then I finished the Newham course, and then they started giving you the placements on Savile Row. And I somehow stuck with Huntsman. I just seemed to get on with all the guys there, and they seemed to like have me around. So I kept showing up, being like, "Can you pay me? Can you come in?" Until eventually they were like, "Well, we can't give you a position here, but we've just acquired a shirt shop that needs someone to go and work down there. Do you want to go and work down there?" So I was like, "Yeah, sure. It's a job in the industry I want to work in. Yeah, definitely." Came and worked down here, and then Darren, who I still work with now, left for a bit. And as he left, they had space for me to come in upstairs, and they needed someone to kind of fill his space. And so they offered me an apprenticeship under John, who had never had an apprentice before. So it's quite touching.
Never.
He said yes. Yeah. He'd never wanted to teach anyone before. And then he said yes to teaching me. So I feel blessed. Right. And then, and then Darren came back, and I was able to learn from the two of them. They both have different schoolings of how to draft patterns and how to fit. So it's nice to be able to bounce off the two of them. And then, So
do you also make jackets, or do you make like trousers and other tailored garments?
I do for myself. I wouldn't dare to do it for someone else, because it's a specialism and there's a lot I don't know about that.
I understand.
Shirts are what I've fully learned in, whereas I can kind of muddle my way through making a pair of trousers.
Right.
Probably just about do a coat, but it would take me a very long time. It wouldn't be very
good. Okay. And do you just cut at work, or do you also make the shirts at work?
At work, I just cut.
Okay.
But again, I make shirts myself at home.
Right. So, if I would want to become a shirt maker, for example, and I have to go through an apprenticeship, I've been through like a tailoring apprenticeship, but how is a shirt making apprenticeship? Where do people usually start? What are the things that they have to learn first? What are the things that they have to do most of? And what sort of route do they have, or what sort of choices do they have?
The choices is different. It is interesting because we don't have that many shirt makers, and I think the majority of shirt makers that we have are all cutters. We have very, very few like freelance shirt sewers. We at Bud have a workroom in Andover, and we kind of struggled to get the staff for it.
Do you know why that is?
That might be a subject of the voice. It's mostly pay, I
think. As in tailoring with all tailoring companies.
Well, I mean, again, this shouldn't be in here, but it's sort of a very high demand job that's not paid very well. So all the girls and all the people that get jobs in Andover realize quite quickly that they can get paid more to work the tills and Tesco's. So it's factory issues. Whereas I guess in tailoring, you end up self-employed and you end up being able to earn quite good money. Right. Whereas in a workroom, you don't really have that opportunity. But that's where we struggle, is that, if you're more of like a freelance shirt maker, or you're a shirt maker that uses outworkers, there's a very small pool of people you can use to actually sew the shirts together. And that's really where we need a few more people coming in and learning how to actually sew and doing it well. And I guess because there aren't enough of us to actually teach it, there aren't enough people coming in to do it. But cutters we have quite a few of now. And there's a few people that can do both, cut and sew. Right. You can do that. And I guess shirt making is maybe not quite as complicated as tailoring, so it's quite good to be able to do both.
It sure is difficult, man. I mean, I've seen machines in factories that just like with one button it just sews the entire front, or it sews the entire collar. But actually doing it on one sewing machine, like handling it, as an individual, is very difficult. It's super difficult, and it's like you have to, you're edge stitching, for example, and then one stitch goes in a different direction, and then you have to unpick the whole thing because you will see that, and that's all you've got. You don't have like interlinings, pads, and like canvases, so all you've got is like good, neat machining. So it definitely is difficult. Yeah.
Yeah. It is.
So you say that there are more cutters than makers in general.
Yeah.
So
But then there's only about 5 cutters.
Oh, right. Okay. So who's making all the things that all these cutters are cutting?
So I think, so for us, we have a workroom. We have maybe 12 people in our workroom that sew it all together. So that's us.
Oh, okay.
Sorted for that. So Tom will use some outworkers. I think he's got 2 or 3. Ema cuts and makes herself. She does everything by herself. And then Sean, I think, has a couple of people that make for him that he keeps in-house. And that's kind of it. And then you get sort of Turnbull and Asters and other things where it's a workroom similar to ours, but on a larger scale. So it's not the same as the sort of tailoring industry where there's a lot of freelance sort of jumbled around that you can just grab at. It's kind of a case of you need your infrastructure in place.
I see. And do you, if I would say, do you know what the average price is for a shirt maker who makes the shirt? How much does the average shirt maker charge for a job?
Oh, I have no idea.
Okay. Because I'd like to get like a good sense of what the shirt making scene is kind of like. So let's say I want to be a shirt cutter. I want to be a shirt cutter. What sort of steps would you say I should expect if I want to get into shirt cutting, for example, as an apprentice?
Well, if you've got an apprenticeship, what you'll probably learn first is striking. So how to cut out the cloth. You'll probably do that a lot. And then you'll be shown how to make a pattern. And then you'll be shown how to fit the pattern once you've kind of once you've got the actual making the pattern down, then it's very similar to tailoring cutting, really. It's the same process, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, yes, there are definitely similarities. So do shirt makers also use block patterns, or do they prefer to draft the patterns from scratch?
No, so we have blocks made up for the yokes and slopes, the net lines, basically.
Yeah.
And that's just because drafting each one by hand, you kind of you figure it all out. You do the line, you measure it. It's a little bit out. You tweak it, you measure it, and doing that over and over and over and over again. It's kind of a massive waste of time when we've made a set of blocks for ourselves and they work and we know they're the right size. And so you just use that. The rest of it we draft from scratch.
I see. And is there a specific reason for that?
For drafting from scratch?
Yeah.
Because then you get the customer's measurements and you just kind of follow your process of doing it. I almost find it a bit more complicated getting a block,
right,
and trying to alter it. And it's similar to what I was saying with the slopes. You do it there. Is that right? I don't know. Do it again. Whereas drafting it by scratch, you kind of like, okay, that's the measurements. That's where I want it. This is how it goes. And it becomes a lot more of an actual garment that's made to fit that customer rather than a kind of thing that's tweaked and altered into trying to fit the garment. Trying to fit the guy.
So how many how should I ask this? If you would, do you guys make the shirts by hand, or do you machine them?
They're all done by machine.
Yeah.
As you say, like a single needle machine. Yeah.
Okay.
And that's just because we don't have the workers to do the hand. work. I think Sean does, but no one else in England does. So it's generally an English shirt is a one that's done on a single needle machine. My general perception of hand stitching on shirts is that you put a shirt in a washing machine every day. Every time you wear it, you put it through a washing machine. It gets quite a lot of abuse in terms of cleaning, and it needs to be a bit more robust to stand that. And hand stitching can be a bit delicate. You see some hand stitching that's beautifully done and it's perfect and it seems to last. But if you don't do it well, the shirt will just fall apart.
Yes, because I was, there is this tension between, ready to wear tailoring and classic handmade bespoke tailoring. And the counter arguments or points of tension are always usually around, fused or not fused, fully done by machine or, done by hand, etc., etc. But with shirt making, most people who I've spoken to, like clients or other tailors, most of them don't see the point of like a fully handmade shirt. So what I'd like to ask you is, how, amongst shirt makers themselves, how do they view it? Do they think that, ready to wear shirts, which are always like pretty much machined, like bang on you, it's very difficult to see obvious mistakes in a very high quality, high end ready to wear shirt. So how do you, I already see you're thinking like, no, I think I've seen some mistakes. So tell me about it. How do shirt makers see factory made shirts and handmade shirts, and what do they say about them?
Well, as I said before, one of the big sellers is the matching. But then you can get high-end luxury ready-to-wear shirts where they do match and they're very well made. And that's because they're almost made a bit more like a bespoke shirt. They're made on a lower quality, lower quantity. What makes a shirt cheaper is doing it in volume.
Right.
And then that means you almost have to cut corners to not waste time and kind of getting 500 shirts all being made at the same time to all match and be perfect and stuff. You just need them in and out. And often a factory made shirt is, every segment is divided up into an individual person who does that one segment all day. So one person is there sewing the yokes together. Another person is there sewing the cuffs together. Another person is doing the sleeves. Another person is doing like the gauntlet on the sleeves. Another person is. Whereas a bespoke shirt would generally be one person sitting down at the machine doing the whole thing from start to finish, which requires a lot more skill in terms of you have to know how the whole thing's done. And in an ideal world, a sort of factory that also offers bespoke would have it that new people coming in would learn each segment. And once they are perfect at one segment, they would move on to a different segment and so on until they've learned everything, and then they can become like the bespoke person who sits down and could do the whole thing. What else is there? And then the big difference in shirts for bespoke to ready to wear is the fit. Obviously, ready to wear is meant to try and fit everyone as best it can, whereas bespoke is made individually for that individual person. And so getting the pattern right, getting the block right for that person, and it being theirs and individually being theirs, and then having full control over it, not. Like a lot of people will say they're bespoke and they'll do kind of made to measure stuff, which is what you were saying before. It's a block, and then they tweak it to make it fit the customer. But then if they decide to change their block, all of their customers' shirts are going to change in the future. Whereas when a block's been drafted individually for that customer and is stored for that customer, and only changes if that customer comes in and says it needs to change.
Do you often hear the term high armhole in shirt making as well?
Yeah, people throw that around. I'm not sure where they get it from.
Oh,
Um,
must be a few streets for that.
I thought it was quite interesting when I was watching your interview with Stephen Hitchcock when he was talking about high armholes, and
Yes.
he was saying how to achieve a high armhole you need drape, you need to
Hmm.
make it bigger somewhere else
Hmm.
so that it can get around the same space, and that's kind of the similar process to what we do, but we don't say we just do this one kind of thing. I would look at a customer, and if they're very, very slim, like yourself,
Hmm.
and they want a slim fitting shirt, but I don't have much room on the chest to give them that room under the armhole that they need, I'll drop the
Hmm.
armhole lower than
Hmm.
normal so that the neck slope, that the sleeve, the armhole slope
Hmm.
can still be quite a nice line and still give them enough cloth to have a nice sleeve sitting in there
Right. Right. Right.
that won't be sort of tight, won't be binding, won't be sort of
Hmm.
pinching, will still
Hmm.
be comfortable. Whereas if they want a really big shirt, then you can almost
Hmm.
get a higher armhole because then
Hmm.
you've got extra cloth under the arm to
Yeah.
achieve it. And so it
So
doesn't need to be quite so low.
I'm curious. I mean, obviously, the high armhole, as comical as it can sound, because it's just frequently used, it is still a thing. It actually is a technical necessity to achieve, a good fit that allows the arm to at least not lift the jacket up. In shirt making, you want to say something. Tell me what you want to say.
Yeah, I mean it may be a thing in tailoring. In shirt
Yeah.
making, I don't really think it is a thing because
Okay.
ultimately the armhole that you drop it at
Mm-hmm.
is subject to how big their chest is and how they
Mm-hmm.
want the shirt to fit.
Mm-hmm.
So you may give some people a higher armhole, but that's
Mm-hmm.
not because you're trying to achieve something. It's just because their figure dictates it.
Right. Okay. Okay. So what are the things that a client may hear, like a first time client, if I'm coming to you for the first time, or I'm going to a bespoke shirt maker, and if I've been to the tailors and all I've heard is canvas, high armhole, close to the neck, grips the neck, stuff like that, those cliches, let's say. What are the shirt making cliches that people may hear when they go to a bespoke shirt maker?
Well, we have a similar argument about floating canvases and fused canvases. So
Hmm.
we here don't do fused to the cloth canvas.
Right, right.
We call it interlining, not canvas. We don't do fusing to the cloth. We'll fuse it. So we have a floating lining inside,
Okay.
um, which to us is better because when the glue wears out, you get the
Hmm.
bubbles, and
Yeah.
that means the shirt doesn't last as long. Whereas if it's a floating canvas, the two materials sit with each other quite well, and ultimately the cloth will wear through,
Hmm.
and then you can replace that. But that will take longer than the
Hmm.
glue wearing off, and you're getting bubbling. So
Hmm.
it means that the shirt will last longer. That's our argument for it anyway. Everyone has their own debate on
Sure.
that one. Because some people say, oh, that doesn't happen. And I think that doesn't happen if you have the right tools and the right kind of lining and
Hmm.
everything's done, which is probably, again, slightly easier to achieve in ready to wear because you spend a long time finding the right lining for the right cloth
Hmm.
and then you mass produce that. Um, whereas in bespoke, we know the lining we use will work.
Hmm.
Um, what else? It's funny when you live in a world, you don't think about the words you use.
I know.
It's much like learning another language. You kind of
Mm.
it's not till you actually start learning another language that you realize
Hmm.
the way that your language is constructed
Yeah. Yeah.
is really strange, and the fact that certain words we use to
Hmm.
explain things other people don't use,
Yeah.
you just take
Yeah.
them for granted.
True.
Um, uh, I'm trying to think what other terms there would be in shirt making. There's the floating canvases. Um,
Maybe I can ask in a different way as well.
yeah,
Why do why do people usually come to bespoke shirt makers versus just high quality reasonable, decent, fitted, ready-to-wear shirts. I mean, obviously, fit is at the center because you don't have like that many things to play with. So the style of the color and the shapes that you are kind of like creating and the fabrics, but in general, why do people prefer a bespoke shirt maker if we discount the fit, let's say, because that's too obvious.
But then it'll probably be the choice.
Mm-hmm.
You're not limited by choices.
Right.
There's not very much we would say no to. There's an awful lot of cloth that you can pick from.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of qualities you can get. And then there's consistency. As I say, like knowing that your pattern's not going to change. You don't have to say, oh, my neck's got half an inch larger, so I need to shop around all the different shops to find another shirt that fits. You've got something that works. If your neck grows half an inch, we make the collar half an inch larger. Mm-hmm. What else would they come for? Yeah. I think consistency, fit, hopefully quality, and choice.
Right. Do you get a lot of?
You can achieve.
Yeah. Do you get a lot of alterations as well?
As in altering ready-to-wear shirts, or
no, what you have made for them. So they've lost weight, let's say, because you don't have inlay, I assume, so you can't let out, but you can still take in.
Yeah, we can't let out. We only really have inlay in the cuffs, so that we can lengthen the sleeves if needs be, if we can shorten sleeves. What we get a lot of is repairs rather than alterations. Right. So when collars and cuffs have worn out, people will bring the shirts back and have a new collar and new cuff on. And it just means that shirt will last that little bit longer. We don't really alter shirts just because the amount of time it takes to unpick the really small stitches everywhere and take it all apart. You could have made 2 or 3 shirts in that time.
Right. Yeah, that is the difference.
And if you think about like, I don't know, I want the chest taken in a bit. You have to take the sleeve out because we don't do it because we set our sleeves in similar to you rather than sort of putting the sleeve in and doing the whole side body. So we have to take the sleeves out, undo the side bodies, also undo the sleeves, which means taking the cuffs off. So you're fundamentally taking the whole shirt apart.
Yes.
Put it down a little bit and then put it back together again. So we generally don't do that. And probably if we did, we would probably charge four times the amount of just making a shirt.
Yeah. Do you get a lot of jobs for invisible mending?
No. We might get a patch job where if the sleeve elbows go or something, we can kind of sew a patch on, things like that. Not brilliantly neat. It just gives that shirt a little bit more life. I don't think we've ever done invisible mending. I don't know if they can do it to cotton. Can they do it to cotton?
I'm pretty sure well, if it's super fine, I don't know. Because shirt fabrics can get really fine. But you never know, man. I mean, they do definitely do some magic when they are mending something. But I was just curious. So James, I have another question. Obviously, there are a lot of similarities between tailoring, bespoke tailoring and bespoke shirt making. But I'm sure that there are also some very tiny differences here and there. So one of the things I'm very curious about is knowing a little bit about tailoring, being the heart of bespoke in London. Do you feel that shirt making companies or shirt makers have the same resources as tailors have in terms of suppliers that provide interlinings, linings, fabrics, whatsoever, tools, services for the tools like sharpening knives, scissors, shears, whatsoever? Or do you think there is a difference?
I think there is it's not a huge difference, but I think there is a difference. A lot of it is reps. I think we have a very good choice when it comes to cloths.
Okay.
But because all this sort of shirt cloth mills will do ready to wear, so they do very large volume. or they'll do made to measure where it's all sent to factories. They don't offer the same sort of level of customer service necessarily as
Right.
your sort of wool merchants would do, wandering around, checking in, seeing how you're okay. There's only one mill that really makes an effort to do that. And it definitely means that we like them a lot because they come out with chocolate. And so we don't get the sort of similar customer service when it comes to our mills, but we definitely have the same choice of cloth and quality and quantity of merchants and things when it comes to that. When it comes to the trimmings, it's sort of, again, done a lot more on a factory basis. There's a place in France, I think, that produces the linings, and we just have to order that in bulk. And I think that's exactly the same for all the shirt makers. They all get it from the same place. When it comes to buttons, there's a lot more choice and variety, but again, very large minimums. So it's not sort of like your trimming your button merchants where you can order just one or two of like special buttons here and there. We have to have a more limited choice on what we can show people because you have to order thousands and thousands of something in order to get it. And so when you've got like six or seven buttons, to order like 10,000 of them to do it, it's not really worth it.
Yeah, I can imagine. Imagine.
And then what else goes into a shirt? Buttons. Sharpening tools. We're quite lucky because our workroom has quite good connections when it comes to. They've managed to find somebody who can sharpen all our shears for us, so we've had all our shears kind of brought back to life recently. But the knives are so difficult because people don't even. They're not your normal knife.
What's different about them?
So this is the thing.
Bring out the knives, James.
During lockdown, my brother became a bit of a knife nerd. Right. And he went off and found somewhere and learned how to make his own knife and all this sort of stuff, which sounds more scary than it actually is. It's more nerdy than scary, really. But and so then I was telling him all the troubles that I've been having with our knives and the fact that, you know, once a knife's gone, they're gone, and there's not very many left for us to work with. So he managed to find a knife, which is a very special Japanese knife that's super, super sharp, and it wasn't sharp enough.
It wasn't sharp enough?
Yeah. It's one
for
that,
what?
You know,
cutting one shirt?
Yeah.
Whoa.
So you hold up a piece of paper and you can just slice through it like that.
Yes,
But it won't work in the way it needs to work with us, and it's because our knives need to be very, very thin the whole way through, not really have much belly, and you need to be constantly working them so that, because knives generally are shaped like that, so you kind of work them so that they get thinner like that rather than
I see,
sort of get thinner like that.
Similar to a straight razor almost, because those go like kind of like in a very, very thin line as well.
Yeah, but it's kind of the composition of the steel itself. Let me see if I can. So if I get these three. So this is my knife that I use.
Right.
You can kind of, when it catches the light, you can see.
Bloody hell.
That's obviously the old knife there, and all of this is where it's in. So you're kind of wearing it thin.
Yes.
From the middle of it there, so that as that gets thinner, you lose the tip there. And this one started to get like ridges, which you won't be able to see because they're tiny.
Yes.
Across the tip, which means that as you're driving the knife through, it catches and it doesn't cut it perfectly. Yes. So I have to keep working it. Just cut myself something. You have to keep working it to wear that out. And this is the knife that my brother got for me, which is, it's a very different composition of steel.
Wow.
So you can see that there's a slightly different steel at the tip as there is running through there.
Yeah.
And then wear this out on a whetstone.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the point is to try and wear away that stone so that more of that stone, that's not stone, steel, is prevalent, and that gets it kind of sharper.
Yeah.
But because of the shape, the composition of it, it's not thin enough. So
I see.
I would almost have to kind of wear it from this bit with the patterning on it and get the whole of that top bit as thin as this.
Yeah.
To kind of make it worthwhile, but then that wouldn't really make the knife anymore.
Mm-hmm.
But then this one is quite a good example. Let me just wrap something on the finger.
Well, the knife is sharp. That's for sure.
Yeah. Don't drag your finger across it. But this one is one that used to be my favorite knife, perfect knife, and then it slightly lost its tip. And when we found these people that do our shears really well for us, we sent some knives off to them to do, and they sharpened them how you would sharpen a kitchen knife.
Right.
And so they've gone from being very thick, and then they kind of curve in like that quite aggressively. And now this doesn't cut anything. It couldn't even cut butter.
I thought you were gonna say, and now it's the best knife.
No.
So why is the back shaped like that? It's a very specific shape. Yeah.
So this knife would have looked like that originally.
Oh,
and
right.
it's just over years of being sharpened. I imagine that shape there would have been on this, but it would have just been a design feature.
Right.
But yeah, so that's, and then this would have looked like would have looked like that.
Oh, okay.
They start off kind of looking like this, then they get worn down to that, and they get worn down to that, and then before you know it, you've got a knife that
looks like an unpicker.
Looks like that.
Yeah.
So this is another one where he's charmed it like a kitchen knife, and the belly just curves in, and there's no nice clear point to cut with.
I see. Okay.
But Mr. Butcher has found some kitchen knives that he's been wearing out recently, and he seems to be getting there with them. But they're quite blunt.
So what do you guys think of rotary cutters? Because I've seen some shirt makers use those as well.
Yeah, a lot of shirt makers use rotary cutters. Generally because you can't find the knives.
Yeah, well, I can.
It's a very different discipline. With a knife, you dig in and you pull towards yourself, or pull across. With a rotary blade, you push in and you push away from yourself.
Right.
I think a rotary blade pushes the cloth too much as it's rolling.
I see.
It also can't necessarily do as thick a layer as a sort of knife, because a rotary blade is obviously like safety protected, so it can't push down as far. I really struggle with the necklines on the rotary blades, getting the round knife to go around the curve.
Yeah.
I struggle with doing that, but I know of other shirt makers that use rotary blades, and the boys use rotary blades that can do it perfectly. But I think it's just different training, different skills. But I prefer using a knife. So I'd rather struggle trying to keep a point on a knife, even though it's something you can waste an entire day on.
Yeah. So how about? I mean, you did say that it's very difficult to find shirt makers, and there aren't many of them. But what sort of factors do you have in the shirt making scene for training up people? I mean, is the standard way of learning a traditional apprenticeship, or do you have like good courses where you can learn shirt making, or and how are other countries that have shirt making kind of like as part of their garment industry do that? Is it very similar to the UK, or is UK unique in the way it's built up?
It depends on where you go. If you come to us, you would and do shirt making in our workroom. You would start off by learning the simple sewing stages, get your sewing stage up, and then you would learn each segment. And then you would probably start actually doing shirts, as I said before, and kind of breaking them up into little bits. But it depends. If you go to someone else, they might teach it differently. And other factories may do it differently. But in terms of other places around the world, I think you can kind of, they tend to have, I don't want to say a pyramid scheme, but something like that in factories where you come in and they have a progression for you. So you sort of, you learn something, you become very good at it, and then you become the sort of manager of that section of it. And then you move on to another thing, and you learn that, and then you become the manager of that until you kind of, you can do everything. But then they also have universities where you can learn this stuff. And I just don't think we do, because we had the free apprenticeship course for tailoring, but that wasn't like a notable degree. And as far as I know, you can't get a degree in pattern drafting, or you can't get a degree in sewing in this country. So, whereas I think other countries, that you'll apply for a job in a factory because you've studied it in university and you've got the practical skill of it. Right. And I think that's always been the UK's downfall when it comes to education, is it's not educating people how to be accountants, not how to manufacture. And I feel like export needs to be more important to us as a country, and producing something and selling it. And yet we're not investing in an educational system that helps those people that would be able to learn the practical skills to make something. That then the country can sell.
Yeah, well, it is a very important thing, and there are a lot of people with talent who want to do that. So if the infrastructure isn't really developed for them to be able to efficiently do that and kind of like contribute to, like you say, something like the export, then opportunities are missed, to say the least, let's say.
Yeah, very much so. And I think we used to have things like that. You used to either go to university, or you would go to a school that teaches you bricklaying or
yes
construction like that, and we don't have that anymore. And I think that's a big shame, because on top of the fact that it means you don't get people who are learning the skills and the interest in it at a younger age, you're also what was I going to say? I got distracted. You're also making those people that maybe aren't academically minded feel like they're stupid, because there's constant tests with maths and with algebra and with science and everything. And if you're not the sort of person that can process information that's written down, memorize it and repeat it, then you're deemed as lesser of a person.
Or even if you're just less interested, you may even be, some people can really interpret all those things well, but they just don't have the interest in it.
And then they're made to feel like they're not worth as much as everyone else, and then they don't really pursue anything. And so that's where I think we're failing, is that if the option of a practical path was given to children from a younger age, then I think we'd probably have less destructive children.
Well, I mean, you're
a better
right.
future for a lot of people.
Absolutely. And look, it is also the case that, I mean, we both know that learning something like tailoring or shirt making is like you say, you don't go to a school, get a degree, and then you're like a shirt maker and everyone wants your shirts. It's like
Yeah,
I have to say that from what I have experienced, most companies find it also very difficult to make that process easier. You know, for someone apprentice to come in, actually stay, be able to work, and say like, hey, I can see a future in here, so I'm going to commit to this so that in the next 10 years I become a really good shirt maker. And I think that at the same time,
yeah.
it is very difficult for the companies to do that. But what things do you think the companies can do to help develop the talent that is interested in shirt making or coat making or trouser making or whatsoever?
It is. I can kind of see why that happens for companies though, because a lot of tailoring companies, proper companies that really make
Mm-hmm.
themselves,
Mm-hmm.
don't necessarily make a huge amount of profit, don't
Mm-hmm.
necessarily make a huge amount of money,
Right, that's
and
true.
then
Yes.
they have to pay people who don't know anything
Mm-hmm.
to come in and learn from them. So on top of
Mm-hmm.
they have to they have to stay alive as a business. They have to bring in people who don't know anything. They have to pay somebody to teach that person something, to take time away from making something that they can sell
Mm-hmm.
into teaching that person something that then there's not necessarily any guarantee that they will want to continue with it once they've started it.
Mm-hmm.
And then if they then leave, you have to then replace them with someone else and
Mm-hmm.
start the whole process again. And you've not
Mm-hmm.
really got any further. So all of your investment's gone down the drain. And it's difficult when you're not a hugely profitable business to keep doing that.
Mm-hmm.
And so I do feel for them. And it's tricky. I don't know what they could do because I know there are things like Lab,
Mm-hmm.
London Academy of Bespoke. It's a
Mm-hmm.
really great option for people to learn a lot of stuff in a great community. Um, and so there could be a lot, and I think a lot of companies on Savile Row do support Lab really well, or try
Mm-hmm.
to anyway. And more things like that could be a good option for it. But then I think even that is like quite an expensive thing that if you've just come out of school
Mm-hmm.
and that's your option, it may be alienating. So I don't know. What I'd love to say is that apprentices should be paid more and
Yeah. Yes. Yes. Yes.
be shown everything. They should be given a structure to their career,
Mm-hmm.
and that's probably is what's missing. I know. Again, I think Hitchcock was saying on his interview with you that he would learn from someone, and then once you start learning how to do something, then you would be helping the person who's teaching you by
Yes.
doing it for them. And I don't think there necessarily is that structure
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
in it anymore. But I think on top of being paid, people like knowing that they're progressing, like knowing that they're doing well. And so if the companies figure out a way of really reassuring that employee that what they're doing is contributing something
Mm-hmm.
to them in a way that like made them feel like they're progressing with what they're doing and didn't just spend 5 years sitting around
Mm-hmm.
not really learning anything, that would be great. But as I say, it's expensive,
Yes. Yes.
big
Do,
investment. Even if it's not really paid very well, it's still a lot of money for the companies to put
it is. Yes,
aside.
it is. Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. Do you think that? I mean, this may sound like a silly question, but I do think there is something to it. Do you think that crafts people, artisans, are very different than business people, so that when they do set up their own business, they just somehow don't have the mentality of a business person to be able to structure their companies so that it would have the profits that it needs so that it can invest in the craft? Or is it just the nature of the work itself?
I think it's the nature of the work itself. I think if you are a craftsperson, you're putting love, you're putting passion, you're putting dedication into what you're making. If you're a business person, you're trying to build something to sell. And ultimately,
but aren't you doing that as a craftsman as well? Would you say?
I think
still
you're
have
making
to
something.
sell, right?
You have to sell it, yeah. But I think the driving force of it is the passion and it's the love that you put into it. Whereas I think a business person doesn't necessarily have passion or love for what they're doing.
Yeah.
They're looking at the numbers. And that's their focus and their driving force. And I guess in that way you could say that a businessman is a craftsperson because they're building a business.
I mean, yes, there is that
their
aspect.
love is in something separate other than the actual physical object that they create. And some craftspeople are very good business people.
Yes, that's also true. Yes.
But they're probably the ones that are very conscious of money and are aware of what they're creating. I know there's a few guys that we travel around America with, Gaziano Gerling. One of them is very much the shoemaker, and the other one is a bit more of the businessman. So the shoemaker kind of just leaves him to it. And it's just like, I just want to create the best shoes I can and make them beautifully. And I'll be involved in the business, but ultimately I don't really want to be because that's not where my love and my passion is.
Yes.
So, yeah, and I think you can be an artisan and then also make lots of money, but I think generally from the amount of hours you put into something you really, really care about,
Yes.
unless you're able to just charge whatever you want for what you're doing, there isn't necessarily the pool of customers to buy it. And so if you really want to make money off it, you need to cut corners and retrofit something into being affordable so that it can achieve a wider audience. And then that's about making money.
So actually, speaking about reaching a wider audience, obviously not everyone can afford like a wardrobe full of bespoke suits, and they may say, well, £4,000, £5,000, £3,000 may be a little bit too expensive for me. But then strangely, and I'd like to see what you think, because maybe I've got it wrong, but I've heard some people say the same about shirts as well. And they would be like, £300 for a shirt, £400 for a shirt is just not worth it. So maybe someone would say, well, if a suit is too expensive, the shirt would be some sort of an entry level into bespoke. But then if they would say £300 for a shirt is just too much, then how does that work? Have you experienced that personally as well in conversations with people?
Yeah, but I think 100%, people put their own idea of, what's the word I'm looking for? Value on something. That's their decision, really. I think the cost of something is the cost of something. That is, the amount of time it takes to produce, the amount of value it takes to produce. That's what the garment is. If someone turns around and says that's too expensive, that's because in their mind, they can't justify that cost. And that's not to say that they're wrong. It's just the way they approach it.
Right.
There are people that can't necessarily afford a £300 shirt or a £5,000 suit, but they will because they understand the value of it.
Yeah,
and they appreciate the value of it and they love it. And so they will save every penny to do it because it makes them happy. And there are people that can afford £10,000 a suit, but don't see why they should. And so we'll say it's too expensive. And so I genuinely think the value, like trying to chase people who tell you that that's too expensive, is a waste of time, because you're never going to convince them that it isn't a waste of like isn't a lot of money.
Yeah.
And so you're better off chasing those people that, and kind of continuously making those people who love what you do happy, rather than trying to appease everyone.
Do you find that most of the clients you have are also bespoke tailoring clients, or do you as well? They go together?
Yeah, we have quite a mix, because, as you're saying, like a shirt is a very different value to a suit. £300 to £400 for a shirt compared to £5,000 to £6,000 for a suit. Big difference in money. And so somebody who can't necessarily afford £5,000 for a suit probably can afford £300 for a shirt. And so we do get a couple of people that aren't bespoke tailoring customers, but do come for us for bespoke shirts. And then they'll probably go to like a made-to-measure tailors and get their suits there, and they're probably still quite happy with that. But then a lot of our customers will be bespoke tailoring customers as well, because they really understand the value of what it is they're buying.
And would you say that they buy the shirt to go with the suit, or do they buy the suit to go with the shirt?
It tends to be this. They're buying the shirt to go with the suit.
Right.
We often see people, because bespoke tailors, you do draw patterns, don't you, that you can give to the customer. They can walk away with, oh, this is what I'm buying. And we get a lot of them. They come in here and they get out their little swatch and put it next to all the cloth and be like, oh, that one works well with that. I'll do that. And that one works well with that.
Yeah.
So you can see it's a lot of that. Certainly in America, I have a customer who spends quite a long time just staring at a cloth, kind of not really saying anything, and it's because he's mentally going through his wardrobe thinking, what would what would that go with? What can I wear that with? And oh yes, okay, I'll get that one. And he's picked the garment that he's going to wear it with. I think a suit is your sort of trophy piece, your sort of what everyone sees, and the shirt just has to complement it, doesn't it? It's the one under it. It's what makes it very difficult for us to market ourselves, because
this is very interesting. Tell me more.
Because stylists will come in and they'll say, oh, I need a white shirt. You go, okay, there's a white shirt, and they use a white shirt in a photo shoot. There's a man in a beautiful suit, a lovely white shirt underneath, and no one really registers the white shirt, because the white shirt complements the suit but isn't the statement. And so we get that all over and over and over again, and it's like we can't just keep giving white shirts and not really getting anything back from it. But then, how do you make a shirt as a statement without making it look ridiculous?
Yeah, well, that is a very good point. So would you say that it's somehow would it be in the interest of, hypothetically, of course, would it be in the interest of shirt making companies if bespoke suits were just like disappeared and people were just wearing shirts and trousers? No,
not at all. No.
Okay, and you say this because you're being diplomatic, or would you say that it actually would be?
I think it'd be a shame if you get rid of suits. Why would you do that? Yeah, it's like a shirt is a nice compliment to a suit, absolutely. And I'm not saying that a suit should go away because of that.
No, I was just wondering, because if you are, like you say, if you're a company that produces shirts, but the shirts are very difficult to market because they're always like seen as complementary products, and they're always kind of like mainly hidden underneath a jacket, then maybe it would be easier to market the shirt as the main thing if there wasn't a suit. So that's why I was kind of like asking.
Yeah. But I think even then people don't necessarily look at that shirt If it's just a plain white shirt or something, and go, oh yeah, I need that. They might look at it if it's something like a Lido shirt, like a beach shirt, or a fun jersey shirt, or something that's a bit different, a bit unique about it. Something that has a statement to it. But then a lot of men, certainly in the bespoke world, would never actually buy something like that. Because it's not something they would wear. So then you start chasing a different market. You start chasing a sort of fashion crowd. So then that would be counterintuitive.
I can imagine.
It's like a vicious circle, isn't it? Of like, how do we achieve this? Make it interesting, but make it sell. Make it interesting, but make it sell.
Yeah. Well, it does require a lot of effort. So, James, the one other thing I'd like to kind of like touch upon is that, you know, for like what you said, something that I very much agree with, which is people need to feel that they are growing when they are working somewhere. And I guess the reason why they need to feel that they are growing is not to feel as if their life is just useless and they are doing something valuable with their life and they can see it go to a better place, let's say. So purpose in that sense becomes a very important aspect of anyone, not just shirt makers, coat makers, just people in society in general. But one of the things that people spend most of their time with is their work. And if your work doesn't give you the feeling, that satisfying feeling of, hey, I'm not only being useful for myself, but I'm also seeing myself grow, but I'm also seeing my growth have a positive impact on my family, in society, in my community, etc. The first question I'd like to ask you is, why do you make things? What do you see as the purpose of the work that you're doing? And the second question that I'd like to ask you is, what role do you think that people like me and you have in society? Because there is this weird, cynical voice that some of our colleagues get, and which is like, oh, you're only making clothes for rich people. But I think there is something beyond that. It's not just that, you know? So starting with the first one, let's say.
The first one was, why? What was the first one?
Why do you make things?
Why do I make things? I would say I make things because it makes me happy. The satisfaction of having finished a garment and looking at it and thinking I made that and being really happy and pleased with it is the greatest feeling. It was amazing. That sense of achievement is, you know, the endorphins that naturally hit you
absolutely.
when you can sit back and say, I did that. It's great. That is why I make things. Because it makes me happy. Because it's a drug.
Do you only have that with clothes, or do you also have that with other things you make?
Yeah, with other things. Yeah. Like when you cook a nice meal and it looks really nice and it tastes really nice.
Yes.
I did that. The sense of achievement. I like to draw sometimes, and when you've drawn something and you're actually happy with what you've drawn, it's like, that's really good. And I did that.
Yeah.
I don't know, even like painting a room, which is not something I regularly do, but, you know, you sit down, you do it, it's a lot of hard work, a lot of labor, and then you sit back and think, I did that, I achieved that. It's a wonderful feeling. Yeah, I think that's why we do anything. For the sense of achievement at the end of the day.
How important would you say beauty, the aesthetic beauty, is important for you? How important is it for you in that achievement? So do you get the sense of the satisfaction from the fact that you made something, knowing that it took a lot of hard work and effort? Or do you take more pleasure in the fact that it looks beautiful, despite the fact that maybe it's not up to the highest standard, perhaps, something like that?
It's definitely a mix of the two. When you make something and you look back and you're looking at it and you think that's beautiful, that's when you know you've done it. Yeah, I'm definitely a very visual person. Like, I like when I'm looking at paintings and art galleries and things. I love looking at the brush strokes and the way they've achieved the effect that they've achieved through it. And then once I've done that, then you step back and you look at the whole painting and the composition and the beauty of it. And that's what I really look at. I know a lot of people will look at paintings and think, oh, the artist achieved this because they were trying to do this, and that's what they see. And I think I'm not that kind of person necessarily. It's sometimes nice to know that, but ultimately I like looking at the painting. I like the visual of it. And it's the same with clothes and stuff. When something looks beautiful and looks amazing and you've made it, you know, all the bonuses.
Okay. So then, second question.
The effect on other people. I think clothing is a fundamentally fickle thing. We don't need clothes ultimately. We need something that keeps us warm. And it's only really the sense of shame that's why we wear clothes. But I think what clothes mean nowadays is you're representing your identity. You're telling everyone that sees you, this is who I am. You're asking people to read you like a book. Like the wrong book. You're not wanting to give people the wrong impression of who you are. So you choose the kind of clothes you want to wear that says who you are. And so I think that's what we do in our role, is that people come to us and say, I want to be this person, make me this person. And you make them the clothes that represent the person they want to be. And that's where it's really important that the person making the clothes also is the person talking to the customer. Because we're not just looking at the way they stand or the shape of their belly or how their shoulders sit or what have you. We're also talking to them and finding out the person they are and what they might want from their clothes. So that we can make them a garment that they're happy with, that they can walk down the road feeling proud in. And I think people look stupid when they're not comfortable in what they're wearing.
That's very true. That is very true.
And so that's what we're trying to achieve, something that people can feel comfortable in so that they can be confident and they can be themselves. So that's, yeah.
Do you think that clothing, no, that's the wrong. Do you think that people can get to know themselves better through the exploration of clothing?
Yes, I think they can. I think people go on a journey with clothes. Certainly when they're just starting out, it's very tempting for people to come in and have something made that is ridiculous and is over the top. And it happens quite a lot. For us, it's collars. People will pick stupid collars, and they'll pick 7 different stupid collars, and then 3 or 4 orders down the line, they're sticking to their traditional collars. They don't.
What's a stupid collar?
Like the one I'm wearing at the moment. They'll be like, oh, I want a pin, I want a tab, I want something that is detachable, I want this, I want that. And you go, yeah, sure, okay, we can do all of that. And then 3 or 4 orders down the line, they go, no, just a regular collar's fine.
Yeah.
But they're exploring, they're finding themselves, they're finding their voice. And some people are like, will realize that, oh yeah, detachable collars, all this fun, crazy stuff here, and that really is me. I feel comfortable walking around like that. And some people will try it and go, it's a bit much. Maybe I want something a bit more muted, a bit calmer. And you can, it's quite fun watching people go on that journey. And sort of see them explode in this kind of colour of wardrobe when they discover that they can have whatever they want. To then become very muted and very staid. And it might be more sensible to do it the other way around. Stick with your navy suit, your very simple, basic white shirt, classic, get everything right, and then start tweaking it and start adding in a bit of colour, throwing in a bit of crazy design. Messing around here and there. But people don't tend to do that. They tend to go crazy and then settle down. What I was going to say? No, it's gone.
Okay, all right. So, James, I've written a few things based on our conversation. I'd like to do a speed round with you in one word. First thing that comes up your mind. Are you ready?
Okay. Okay. That's
All right.
whatever.
All right. Okay. Okay. Most influential person.
Most influential person.
Yeah.
My parents.
Very good. If you could make three changes to the industry, what would that be? What would those be?
Three changes. Uh, oh, that's a really difficult one. I want to say more money.
Okay, that's one.
More money floating around it.
Yeah.
It'd be lovely if it was just quicker.
Mm-hmm.
Like that, you could make something magical. You get that endorphin run really, really quickly.
Yeah, yeah.
That's not really the industry. That's the actual physical process. So,
Sure.
I don't know. I quite like the industry.
Well, that's good. No, really, that's good.
Yeah, sure there probably are faults in it, but I don't know. I want to say more of a sense of community, but actually, it's got a really good sense of community.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I think maybe there might be a couple of people that feel outside to it, but there is definitely. I was talking to Anda Roden about this the other day, and she was sort of saying how in the 90s and the noughties they had a massive issue of no young people coming in, and so there was very old people and there was a couple of very young people that were sort of struggling to feel like they fit in. But she's saying now there's this great sense of young people that all band together and hang out with each other, and there's a great sense of community through that. It's like it doesn't really need a sense of community because it kind of does have it. But I guess just wish those people that didn't feel like there was one would come into the fold a bit more.
Okay. So, three qualities of a real master.
The
Knowledge.
the
Patience.
And the ability to say they don't know.
Okay. Yeah, that's a very good one.
Yeah. A lot of people will say, no, that's not how you do it. That's not how you do it. This is how you do it. But there's never one way to do anything. The people who are like the best thing about Mr. Butcher is that he's always said, I don't know, try it and see.
Yes. That's a very good thing to encourage.
You do try it and you do see. And you learn more from doing than from being taught.
Okay. So, tailoring books, or rather shirt making books.
Oh, there aren't any. There's only one that we've got
There's
up there.
only one.
That I know of. And it's very old and very outdated.
And that's mainly around patterns or also making?
That's just patterns.
Patterns, okay.
So like, I think there are books that are being written now, but there are a lot more.
Oh wow, that's a big book as well.
Almost factory made. So this is
How to Cut Shirts.
How to Cut Shirts by Sydney J. English, England. And let's see, when was it published?
Have you used that book often, or is it just?
So when I first started out, it was sort of have a read through this book, have a look at it. It's even got knives.
Oh yes, yeah.
Probably tells you where to get them from the shop.
Yeah.
And it uses all of these sort of tables. Let's see, it's all falling apart. All these kind of mathematical tables and figuring things out. A lot like a traditional tailoring book would have too. But, It was written by a bespoke shirt cutter as well,
Mm-hmm.
and he does a lot of like, well, the salesman will do this, but they shouldn't be doing this. This is how you do a shirt.
Oh yeah. Well, we've heard that, often. So, what do you find the most difficult thing in shirt making? One word.
I'm not sure if I want to say what I want to say. It can be the customer. It can be fitting the customer's mind.
Oh, interesting.
Not
I've never.
to say that the customer, they're always such a pain, blah 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 blah.
Mm-hmm.
But you can get the best fitting shirt,
Mm-hmm.
and the customer will still want to pick fault with it because they feel like there still needs to be tweaks done to it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that's really what's most frustrating, because you produce something that is stunning, is beautiful, and they're still nitpicking it. It's like, stop it.
Interesting. Okay. So, fashion industry.
What about the fashion industry? What's the question?
Well, in one word, what do you think? First thing that pops up your mind.
Too many people who don't know what they're doing.
All right. Handmade or machine made?
For sure,
Yeah,
machine made.
machine
The
made.
suit's handmade.
Okay. T-shirts under a jacket.
Under a jacket. Oh, you see, because I quite like it, but I can never do it. My neck's too long. I feel really stupid. And I think the thing with that is actually a lot of bespoke jackets, there's quite a lot of structure in the top collar of the jacket, which makes it sit proud and sit on your neck really strong. Whereas sort of ready to wear, it's very soft and floppy and like near. And I think that works quite well when you don't have a collar underneath it for it to sort of sit against. Whereas I think a bespoke jacket with a t-shirt underneath is too stiff, it's too upright. So if you made a really soft bespoke jacket with a really soft collar, then a t-shirt would be great. But a nice stiff jacket with a t-shirt underneath looks weird.
Okay.
And I can't do it. My neck's too long, and that annoys me.
Yeah, well, I've got the same, man. So my jackets are also very high around the collar.
Yeah.
So I've got two more. Three. Sorry. The essence of craftsmanship.
The essence of craftsmanship is passion.
Passion. All right. Savile Row.
I'm going to say tradition.
Tradition.
And what I mean by that is because a lot of people say, oh, Savile Row is stuffy, really old-fashioned. They need to modernize. They need to realize what the state is. And I say no. I think there are people that are coming into the row and are modernizing tailoring and are bringing something interesting into making clothes. But that doesn't necessarily have to be Savile Row. Savile Row is where you go if you want something traditional and English and flannel.
Yeah.
That's its identity. It doesn't need to change it.
What would you say about German Street? If I would say German Street.
I would say, does it know if it's shirts or shoes?
Right.
German Street historically was your shirt making street. And now all the old-fashioned shirt makers who were run like us with bespoke tailors in-house and workrooms out in the country are all now mass-produced things where the factories are in other countries and it's all about profit and volume. And then the shoemakers are the people that have, the bespoke shoemakers in-house and the factories out in the country. But the shirt shops are still there. So it's like, are you a shirt street or are you a shoe street? Which one are you?
Yeah. Well, there is a shift maybe happening. So,
Maybe,
okay.
Yeah.
Well, last but not least, James MacAuslan.
He's a fun guy.
Loved it. Absolutely loved it. Well, on that note, thank you very much. I did indeed
Thank you very much.
enjoy a lot the conversation we had, and I look forward to meet you in person soon. Thank you for
Yeah,
this.
you too, you too. Thank you. I really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Bye bye.
And that was James. I hope you all enjoyed the conversation. If you want to see more of James or you'd like to get in touch with him, check out the link to his Instagram in the description of this video. If you have any thoughts, questions, or comments, please let us know, and we sure hope to see you again in the next episode. Until then, bye bye.